If you've ever had that feeling of deja vu, I am talking once again to my good friend Colin. And tonight we are going to be discussing the economics and society of Star Trek, probably leaning towards the Federation. So, where did you start with Star Trek?
Uh,
Which particular series did you see?
I started with the original series with good old Kirk and Spock and Bones and all those guys as a child with this just reruns. I remember I was growing up in the '80s, and so I probably did not capture. I probably have never seen all of them, but I got a good deal from when I was a little kid, and then after that, when I was almost a teenager, that's when the Next Generation came out.
Okay. And did you watch that pretty much through?
Yeah, I saw everything on the
Yeah,
Next Generation.
probably. There may be one or two I missed, but I probably got them all. So, what about stuff that came after Next Gen?
Very sparse. I never got into Voyager really. I mean, I saw a few episodes of each of like Voyager. I saw a few episodes of the what was it the,
Deep
the
Space
Deep Space
Nine.
Nine.
Yeah,
I couldn't even remember. And the same with Enterprise. Enterprise got a little goofy for me pretty quickly, even though I thought it was a good idea.
yeah.
But
Apparently, and I started doing that recently. I got through the first two seasons of Enterprise, and I started rewatching it. In retrospect, it comes back as pretty decent. I don't think anyone was in the mood for it at the time. That's what the problem was. So, what about any of
hmm,
the glorious new Trek that's come up here in the last couple of years?
the only thing I saw was the third season of Picard.
Okay,
Everybody told me they're like, if you actually enjoy the Star Trek world, you're not really going to like what they've done in Discovery. You're not going to like just and the J.J. Abrams things were. I watched those two movies and I was like, those were very meh. I think there were just two. Were there three?
there might have been a third. Gosh, I mean, that shows you how well it all did. Yeah, I watched. So, yeah, the original was absolutely thrilled with the Next Generation. I did watch quite a bit of Voyager. It was kind of hit or miss, but it wasn't too bad. Deep Space Nine, I just couldn't get into, and I may try to do it again at some point because people insist that it has its moments where it kind of finds its legs and starts moving. I watched an episode and a half of Discovery, and that was all there was. It was just to the point where I couldn't even watch it to laugh at it anymore. It just was so painful. So okay, so I guess the question comes up: do you want to kind of look at the evolution of the economy from the original to Next Generation, or do you just want to start talking about the economics straight from the Next Generation standpoint?
That's actually an interesting question to go like, okay, well, what did they say about it in the original series? They didn't. I don't recall them talking a lot
Uh,
about like. I mean, they had some kind of credits.
mm-hmm.
I remember, and they didn't talk about it too much. And I guess they didn't have to because they're on a spaceship,
Right.
and those are the resources you have, or is what is on a spaceship, and you have a replicator that can make almost anything.
Well, at that point, the replicator wasn't really much of a replicator. It was more like an automat.
Oh, okay.
So they didn't have full capabilities to do things like that. Like there's one point where it's kind of the Halloween episode where you got the two aliens that kind of look like chickens, but they're hiding themselves as kind of a wizard and a witch. And there's a
Hmm.
point where, because he's got an imperfect understanding of humanity, he's trying to bribe them with golden jewels. And Kirk just kind of picks one up, looks at it, and laughs. We could manufacture these on the ship. So there's some ability to do that, but there's also points where they very specifically like talk about earning your pay for the week, and it's I don't think it's meant as a like a turn of phrase. It seems like like yeah, you earned your pay for the week, and there are points where they talk about spending credits. The Tribbles episode where Uhura's asking how much it costs, and the guy goes, "Oh no, it's free for you," because he's basically giving it to her, hoping she's going to show it to everyone on the ship, and everyone's going to come down and buy them. So,
Hmm.
and of course, then the original series, several of the characters are essentially merchants of some sort. So presumably, at the very least, they're doing bartering, but bartering doesn't work. So, assuming the credit system is probably functioning as the means of trade.
Yeah, it's kind of unclear to me. Like, did the economy actually change in the next generation, or did it, or is this what Roddenberry wanted to do to begin with? He just didn't have that kind of
And
power.
that's a good question. So, I think it's a little of both. Because, like I said, in the original, really in terms of replication, there really wasn't much. The inference was that, like I said, the food synthesizers were just some kind of like automat where it was doing something with base protein and basically putting it into its form. It wasn't doing the full energy to matter transmission like it was in the next generation. So whether he intended to or not, he changed the means that would alter the economy that would make potentially money not functional. But I think you're also right where Roddenberry probably realized that making a point of having a moneyless system in the 60s at the height of the Cold War probably wouldn't have been a particularly good move. But he was very adamant about it when he got to the next generation. He made a point of telling writers, there is no money. Make sure you understand that money does not exist, it's gone.
Okay, I will have to say, there's probably other examples, but in Star Trek Save the Whales, I don't remember what the actual title
Voyage
was.
home.
Sure. But in that, there's this, it's a throwaway gag, but Kirk's with the, of course, attractive young woman. They've traveled back in time to Earth in the 80s or something. And they eat lunch together, and she has to take the check, and she's like, what, in the future you don't use money? And he's like, no, we don't, and everything. And it's a throwaway gag line, but then they're also trying, it's like, I think Roddenberry trying to retcon this to the original series. I think this is what he had in the next generation is what he always wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Otherwise he wouldn't have said um, so is it fair to say then that the next generation is the economy of Star Trek, even in Kirk's time, kind of, if
Maybe
that was his vision all along.
if that was the division all along. I haven't seen anything where he talks about it back then, but yeah, he probably had that as an intention. But
Or maybe he got more that way just as, you know, he just changed between the 60s to the late 70s or whatever, and his ideas changed. I don't know.
mhm.
Um, I don't know what Roddenberry was like as a person at all, actually.
I never hear anything particularly bad or good about him. So You don't really hear, you don't hear the, the stories where people like, oh, and then here's the crap that Roddenberry did to me, and all this other stuff. So those stories don't really exist. So he must have been at least congenial enough to get along with people.
Yeah, and like the stars that were in his show never say anything negative, and they're like, oh well, Gene wanted to do this, so he did this. But it didn't sound like he was super mad about it.
Hmm.
So I guess he was pretty reasonable as a person. What his philosophies were, I mean,
Yeah.
you live in Hollywood.
Well,
Um,
so are you familiar with? So it was an episode in the Next Generation. It's the one where they're kind of just out there and they find some module floating in deep space, and it turns out it's a pod full of cryogenically frozen people from the 90s or 2000s.
oh yeah,
Okay.
like the one guy is like, why don't you have television?
Yes.
Why don't? And the other guy's like, where's my money?
Yes. Okay. So that episode originally, the thought process was they were going to have Cyrano Jones. And that was the guy, the Tribble salesman. And
Okay.
originally, he was supposed to be the one they found in there. And
Hmm.
it was meant to be a let's beat up on capitalism episode.
It still
Basically,
kind of was.
well, yeah, it was, but the okay, but what the point is Cyrano Jones comes from the original Star Trek period, and Roddenberry very specifically wanted to use him as an avatar of capitalism to basically show him that he's hopelessly outdated and isn't needed anymore, and they've completely gone past that. So he was really going to get into that deeply, and apparently the actor uh, had a very serious medical event and ended up dying shortly after he was supposed to do it. So they came up with an alternative idea and just basically
Mm-hmm.
threw the people in from the 90s aughts type thing, and still went to town on capitalism. But so the thing is I'm wondering if that the idea that he wanted to use Cyrano Jones originally as his avatar, or the capitalism punching bag, if that kind of indicates that he was acknowledging that even though maybe he didn't want a monetary system in the original, that uh, he was acknowledging, okay, I put it there. Now I'm going to show how we got rid of it.
Oh, okay. I mean, and that would have been a much stronger connection if
Hmm.
he could have pulled that off.
So, what do you think on money in Star Trek? Was it intended to be there in the original series? Was Roddenberry attempting to explain the transition? How do you think they dealt with money in general? Comment below. Please smash the like button. If the YouTube algorithm brought you here and you're not a regular viewer, please consider subscribing. We go over a lot of different type things on this channel. And if you know somebody who might find this interesting, please share it with them. Thank you for spending time with me this evening.